All right. Hi, everyone. It is the top of the hour, so we will get going with our next speaker, Dr. Nicole Betts. Dr. Betts earned their PhD in cognitive psychology from Northeastern University in 2019, and then served as a postdoc in Yale psychology for 2 years before transitioning to an industry researcher role in ad tech. And Dr. Betts is here to talk to us about how to build a LinkedIn page. We've heard about this already multiple times. So what a great topic. Let me stop sharing this. All right, Nicole, you should be able to share your screen, and then know that I'll be watching the chat. So if questions come in, I will help facilitate that for you.
All right, I'm just trying to share. Okay, which screen do you see? Do you see the right one with the
Yes,
present?
we see
Okay.
the slide.
The regular slide. Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. As mentioned, I earned my PhD in cognitive psychology from Northeastern University in 2019. And now I've kind of really switched gears. I'm working in ad tech as an industry research role. So you'll see a little bit more about what I do because I'm pulling some of my examples from my LinkedIn page throughout this presentation. But feel free to reach out. Either you can reach me on Twitter. My handle is at the corner of the screen. Or I think that we're going to send out probably copies of this presentation, and you can reach out to me by email too if you have any questions about my transition. You can connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. But mostly what I want to talk today about is LinkedIn, because as you probably already know, as you're probably familiar with it, LinkedIn is a super powerful and popular tool. Like most people that I know at least are on LinkedIn. 875 million people worldwide are members. Just a few like kind of key stats to highlight how LinkedIn can help you find a job. There are 117 job applications submitted every second on LinkedIn. There's a feature on it where you can kind of quick apply, which is, I think, good and bad because you can literally just upload your resume to LinkedIn and then click on any roles that you want. But it also means that you're going to be competing with a lot of people when you do that on LinkedIn. But it is super easy. And 8 people are hired through LinkedIn every minute. So a lot of people are finding jobs at LinkedIn. I found my current role on LinkedIn. I was recruited. So we're just going to talk a little bit more about kind of getting set up in this platform. And even if you already have a page, I'm hoping that some of these tips will provide a little bit more insight in how to like continue to develop and make your profile page stand out a little more, make you a little bit more appealing to recruiters or hiring managers, etc. So in case you're not convinced yet, I know as an academic, I was not on LinkedIn. I was really hesitant to go on it because it just seemed like, why have another social networking platform, social media platform? It also seems like kind of a boring one, to be honest, because all the content is about professional things and not anything like as fun as like Instagram or TikTok or whatever the kids are using these days. But actually really important in this day and age to get on LinkedIn, not just to like connect with professionals, keep in touch with people that you've worked with historically, but also finding job opportunities and again, applying for these job opportunities. So this is just kind of a laundry list of reasons why you should at least have a profile. You don't have to be on it all the time, but at least get yourself set up. And one thing that I really want to highlight here is that a lot of job applications actually require you to include a LinkedIn URL if you're applying to these non-academic roles. So it's definitely important to get on there. And if you're planning to stay in academia, it still is a really great idea to get on LinkedIn because it can help you stay in touch with all of the people that you've worked with. And it can also help you support your students if you have any students that want to explore non-academic paths. This would be an opportunity for you to help them build their network and get them set up and successful in other roles outside of academia as well. And we'll kind of go over a few ways that you can do that as well. And feel free to ask any questions if they come up. I don't mind getting interrupted with questions. Okay, so this is just kind of a roadmap for today and a screenshot of my LinkedIn page. So basically, we're going to talk just a little bit about translating your skills from academia to the non-academic world. Maybe this is something you've already talked about today, but I think it's just something that's important to go over, and it's definitely important sort of foundationally before you get started and invest all of this time in your LinkedIn page to just really make sure that you understand how to communicate your skills to whichever role you're shooting for. We're going to talk about a bunch of different fields that are included on a LinkedIn page. Some will go into more detail than others, but really it's important to just include things in all of the fields on LinkedIn. So we're just going to go over a bunch of those. And then I'm hoping that we'll have a little bit of time to take inspiration from examples. So I'll have examples from each section sort of throughout this presentation. I'm also going to link out to a bunch of resources like web pages throughout. So again, just like explore this deck hopefully after this as well for more resources and additional learning. But hopefully we'll have time for like a little exercise where you can look at some pages and talk to the person next to you about things you like, things you don't like. You can tear apart my LinkedIn page, that's totally fine, just to kind of get you used to looking at and kind of critically analyzing these pages that you see. And then we're going to talk a little bit about just like building out your network, which is completely essential in LinkedIn. So again, this is just an example of my LinkedIn profile page. We're going to go over a bunch of these sections again later, but a couple things that I just wanted to kind of highlight is I try to have like a nice professional picture. I probably could get an even better picture. This one's maybe a little bright, but you want to just have a picture of you in sort of a professional setting. You want to kind of edit your header so that content that's below my name is not just my job and my job title and my company, which is kind of the default. You want to have at least 500 plus connections. So we'll talk about that when we start to build out the network. But that's just going to help make you seem like a real credible person so that when you start applying for jobs and they look at your LinkedIn page, it doesn't just say like 50 connections or something like that. Might be a flag to them that you're a bot even. So that's why you want to sort of have those connections. And then I also recently uploaded this new background sort of photo, which I think is kind of a little bit data analyst-y, and that's kind of the direction that I'm trying to push my sort of brand and path towards, is more like data analytics. And again, we're going to talk about all this stuff later, but this is just my example to kind of get us started. All right, so these first few slides, we're going to talk real quick about translating your skills, because one thing that I just want every academic to know is that you have tons of skills, like tons and tons of skills. Things that you've done in academia are useful both in and outside of the academy. The trick that happens when people are trying to like leave academia is just figuring out how to communicate what you know, all of your skills and experience in the non-academic terminology. So my kind of quick checklist for getting there is first just try to identify your target role. Like, do you want to do something in research? Do you want to do something in data science, SciComm, teaching, etc.? The more specific, the better, but at least try to get sort of a broad idea about what you want to do. And then just try to gather a bunch of resources about that topic. For example, a bunch of LinkedIn pages would be great. And just kind of learn that jargon, and draw connections from their jargon to what you have done. So we're going to go into some of this in a second. So in terms of the jargon, a lot of what I did when I tried to learn the terminology of my current role is literally just a lot of Googling. So you look up all of the like LinkedIn roles, look up a bunch of job ads for things that seem interesting to you, and just Google search all of the terms that you don't know what they mean. And then you try to analogize from what you have done to this terminology. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Close enough is totally fine. One tip that I think I actually got from last year's session here was that you can generate a word cloud just to try to make it a little bit easier and more visually appealing, like what kind of terminology is popular in the kind of jobs ads that you're looking for in the LinkedIn pages for people who have the roles that you want, etc. And this is just a word cloud from my LinkedIn page, just as an example. And one thing that I wanted to highlight is that the word cloud here, there's like a little BB in the corner. That's just because this system doesn't like numbers. So this means B2B, which is something that I do. So just be a little bit, critical, I guess, and make sure that you understand everything that's going into that word cloud, because you don't want to just put random terms like BB in your resume just because it's popping up a lot, right? And you're going to want to use all of these terms to populate your LinkedIn profile, everything that has been analogized to your work experience. This is just for reference, sort of like an example of some jargon that you might see. So things like deliverables or things like what your research produced. Things could be manuscripts, presentations. Stakeholders just means anyone who has stake in, for example, the research that you've been doing or a project that you've been working on. Literally, if you're teaching, your students could be considered stakeholders. So it's kind of a little bit of creativity to try to make those mappings between the terminology that is being used and what you've done. And this is going to get sent out, so I don't need to go through all of this. I'm trying to go through these a little bit quicker to have more time for the LinkedIn stuff. And then another thing that's really big here is consider what isn't relevant to your job. So you don't want to put in every single thing you've ever done. This is a mistake that I made when I first made my LinkedIn profile. Honestly, there's probably some vestigial extra information in there that I could take out, but you don't have to put everything in there. Not everything is relevant, and it's actually going to sort of muddy the waters and make your story less clear to the people who are reading it. So for example, if you're trying to apply for research or data science roles, maybe you don't need to include your teaching experiences, or you maybe don't need to include your service to the department. And generally, like including too much details, like your full publication list, you definitely don't need to put that in your LinkedIn like experience or about me section. There's actually a place in LinkedIn where you can add publications. You can add them all there, but you don't want to have all of your information in every single field in LinkedIn. If you don't have as much experience, like maybe you did mostly teaching, but now you want to switch to more of a research role, you can probably reframe things, but just think about reframing it again in a way that is relevant and it's going to like very clearly draw links between what you've done and what would be useful for the role. And then the last thing before you get started on your page is just to really take stock of your deliverables and try to enumerate your impact, because you want to think about how to describe all of your impacts with numbers rather than just saying, I wrote publications or this research resulted in a number of oral presentations at national and international conferences. Just throw in the numbers. They could be sort of estimates. You can do like 6+ oral presentations or something like that if you're not sure about the exact number. But just having those numbers in there really just kind of adds credence to whatever you are discussing. And so these are just some examples of ways that you can discuss this. And again, I would just recommend looking at examples of pages and seeing how other people might be discussing these things. All right. So I went through that really fast. Happy to answer questions. But again, I just wanted to get to the LinkedIn part of it as soon as I could. So first off, your profile and background pictures. This might seem like a small detail, but it's actually super important for you to make sure that you are making a good first impression with these solid and professional pictures, because this is the first thing that they're going to see. The very first thing is not even going to be your job title. They're going to see your profile picture. So you want them to just be like kind of sort of standard professional pictures, full focus, close up. Here's an example of a bunch of appropriate ones. just something kind of that really puts a good foot forward for you. And then I've also included the dimensions. You want that to be like a square, if possible, like a 400 by 400 pixel, because otherwise it might get distorted when you upload it into LinkedIn. Another thing that you can do, which is kind of going to be seen very prominently in your profile, is a good background photo. So LinkedIn gives this sort of standard, just pretty much blue background photo on your page, but if you create or upload a more unique background photo, you can make a good impression and kind of just stand out a little bit more. There's a million different ideas for what you can do here. And honestly, you can get a little bit creative. So some here include, I think this one's kind of cool. It has like images of the different types of coding languages that they know, and it has some like code in the background. It's kind of cute, definitely on brand if you're going in like a data science route. This one's just an image of the city where they're based, which can totally make sense, especially if you're not looking for a remote role, just something to kind of make you a little bit more personable. And then this one's an image of her doing work and in a very like sort of prominent conference position. So any of these could be ideas that you can do. You can do images of a workspace. You saw my example a little bit, which was maybe a little bit more of an abstract version of like a sort of computer tech. But there's a lot of different options here you can play around with. You can use Canva or another graphic elements tool. They have some free options there. Just make sure that you don't use anything that's requires licenses. So you can use like CC0 Creative Commons images if you wanted to do something like an image of a city, just so that there's no legal implication there. All right, so moving on, the next, again, really top thing that people are going to be seeing when they look at your profile is your headline. So this is going to be right under your name. The default, as I mentioned earlier with LinkedIn, is just going to say your role at your company, which is kind of boring. And this is another way to make a good first impression and kind of just throw in some extra details that you might want your reader, your audience to really hone in on. So there's just a bunch of examples here. I'm a big fan of these like sort of vertical lines so that you can list a bunch of different maybe skills or experiences, or you can maybe ask like a rhetorical question or something like that. You can advertise, for example, if you have any job openings or if you're even seeking a full-time opportunity. So you have a lot of creativity and a good number actually of characters that you can play with here. I think it's 220 characters right now. And it's just another way to improve your personal brand. You can really highlight anything that is of interest to you, but just make sure that you're considering your target audience always, and sort of any sort of important keywords that might be good in terms of making you more searchable or making you seem like a better candidate for those jobs. Always try to be concise and specific on LinkedIn here and like in every single field, because people don't want to read a lot, as short as possible. That's part of why I like these vertical bars, I think, because you don't even need to have full sentences, just kind of list a bunch of things. And also maybe think about like the big picture, like what do you want to be moving towards? What is your goal with people seeing your LinkedIn page? Where do you want to kind of be headed in the future? All right, moving right along. There's also this about section. I'll show you an example in a second. Actually, it's my example, but this is like kind of a concise snapshot of your professional identity. So usually this is told in first person, and usually it's like right underneath the headline, the header. So it's going to be when they scroll down, the next thing that they see. Although when people are actually interacting with LinkedIn pages, they're probably going to be looking at the experience and then scrolling back up to the About Me section. So it might not be actually consumed in the order that it's presented in. But with the About section, what I've been kind of moving towards is trying to tell sort of a story with this section, rather than kind of just the little summary that you might have on the top of a resume, or just kind of a reiteration of a resume, because those would be a little bit less compelling and a little bit redundant given the other content that's on the LinkedIn page. So this is a way for you to just kind of, I think, show off your communication skills, just pique their interest and get them just curious about you a little bit. So the first few lines, like in any story, you want to try to hook them in. So maybe highlight something that's really important about you that you want the reader to know, just something that sets you apart, or even just something that you think will maybe intrigue them or get them to keep reading. It could be something a little bit provocative even, to see, like, just try to get them to read your whole About Me section, because you want them to get engaged. You can think about things like your mission, your experience, expertise, your accomplishments, etc. And then there's like this kind of rising action part of the story. And this is where you can start to kind of maybe back up from the hook a little bit, speak to your industry experience, background, and qualifications a little bit more, call out your specialties. You can provide some data and numbers, but make sure that this section is showing off your personality. And again, make sure that it's different from what you have in your experience section and from what you have in your resume, because people are taking the time to read this and they don't want to just read the same thing over and over and over again. So just a nice way to tell a little bit more about who you are in a more personal way, but who you are professionally in a more personal way. And then I think that it's always hard to end these, at least for me. So a couple of ideas for ways that you can maybe end this. You could just end by saying where you are now and how you're applying your current skills. You can mention your career goals. You can list maybe some technical skills, like how you would have on the end of a resume, or even personal interests, again, to make you a little bit more of an interesting or like unique or well-rounded candidate. Another option that I saw a lot in doing research for this presentation was a call to action, which I don't have, but others do. And it's sort of just an invitation for people to reach out. So this might be a good thing to do if you're just starting out and trying to connect with a bunch of recruiters. If you had like a Calendly account, for example, you can say like, book a time to chat with me about roles that you have that you think might be interested in, something like that. And then you can invite people to reach out that way, or you can just be simple, like, I'd love to chat, send me a message, something like that. So that could be a fun, again, if you're just kind of starting out. All right, so these are just some additional sort of tips and tricks. Honestly, just in general, all of the fields, I want to make sure that you think sort of big picture and stay on brand. So by big picture, just think about kind of long term, what kind of content you want to be associated with you, where you're thinking of heading your career, stuff like that. And also, I think that it just makes for a more interesting story when you can kind of zoom out and try to connect the dots between what you've done kind of historically and what you want to do. So the way that I interpreted this, my own advice, I guess, I sort of zoomed out a lot with the research that I did in my undergrad and graduate studies. So I talked about concepts and categories. And that's kind of what I used as my hook, because I thought that that was probably the best hook that I had come up with at the time. Just kind of something a little bit unique about me that will maybe intrigue people. So I think that that's something that you can do either in the hook or like throughout this. Just kind of think big picture rather than getting into the weeds about what you're exactly doing in this current role, what you've exactly done in your past roles. Staying on brand. Again, this is going to come up in like every single slide, but you just want to make sure that the information that you're putting in there is related to the jobs that you want, and that you're not including additional details that is just not going to be relevant, not going to be super helpful, because you're just really curating all of your professional experiences for that audience. And so just make sure that you have a really good sense of what you want to communicate, because otherwise it's just going to get a little bit muddled, and it's going to be hard for the hiring managers or recruiters to really understand what you're good at if you're just throwing the whole kitchen sink in there. There's also keywords. So this is different from like the buzzwords. Like you don't want your about me section or the LinkedIn page to be just full of these buzzwords that like don't really mean anything, like optimizing vertical integration. Like you want them to have, though, the keywords that are going to be associated with the roles you're targeting. So those are really the terms that the recruiters are going to be searching for in LinkedIn. The hiring managers are going to be searching for it. AI technology is going to be searching for it, probably, because when you submit even resumes or any applications, they're going to pull in your LinkedIn, and they're going to be searching through like the application tracking technology. So those are the keywords that you're maybe would I be identifying from like a word cloud, like I created a couple of slides ago, just to make sure that you are making it clear how you have in the past done all of the things that they want you to do, I guess, for a role. Like that's why we have the keywords. There's also this LinkedIn optimization tool that you can use that could maybe help you find keywords. And you want to highlight the best keywords, the ones that are most important for your job, in the top skills. So I'm trying to, as I mentioned before, push myself a little bit more towards the data analytics stuff. So that's why I have these keywords. I might be editing them a bit, like maybe instead of data visualization, I could use SQL or R or something. But again, just trying to stay on brand and on target there. And then I have like a link here with a bunch of examples of about sections, because I think that this was, at least for me, the most challenging part. But it's always helpful to have a bunch of examples. All right. So then the next section, which we've already kind of touched on, is skills. So the skills field is a little bit weird on LinkedIn because it has its own separate field that you can add skills to, but there's also these top skills that are associated with your About Me section, and there's also skills that will be associated with all of your experiences. But what we're talking about right now is like the general skills section. So this is, you just kind of go in and you add your skills. You can include the hard skills and soft skills, again, relevant to the job you want, again, considering the jargon and the keywords for the roles you're targeting. There's lists of top skills that are out there that are curated for like different years. So you can always kind of keep visiting those and see what is popular these days. You want to try to keep like revisiting and reiterating and refining based on the current trends. But basically you want to include just a smattering of hard and soft skills that are relevant. And again, remember that these will be used in the algorithm for LinkedIn searches. Basically, all the content that's on your LinkedIn page will be, but the skills are also a super important place where you can just add those keywords as well and not even have to integrate them into your experiences or a story in the About section. So you really want to max out this option with all 50 skills that it lets you add in, and it'll tell you how many skills that you have. And LinkedIn also will suggest skills based on your profile, so you can use those if you're not really sure what kind of other content to include. All right, so now we have the experience section. So the experience section also can be kind of tricky because there's experience sections like this on resumes as well. But for these experience sections, they can be a little bit more story-like. There's a lot more, I think, variability that you can incorporate into this section. So I, again, like to kind of start with a hook. I like to use action words in first person. And in general, I recommend highlighting results and outcomes, but I've also included a bunch of really different experience sections here. I've tried to make anonymous. And these are all different ways that people have communicated their academic experience, but now these are people who have left academia. So on the top right, my mouse isn't showing up, but we have this research analyst position. So this is actually this person actual, I guess, technical role was like a PhD candidate, but because they wanted to make sure that their actual skills and experience was translating to the current role, they've renamed this research analyst instead of like graduate research assistant or whatever their actual name was. This is kind of a debated technique, but it is an option that you can take if you want. But basically, this person used bullet points to again, highlight all of the data analyst related things that they did during their PhD. So they don't really talk about a lot of the stuff that they did. They don't mention anything about teaching. They don't mention anything about service. They're just talking about specifically the coding languages that they used. They're talking about how the kinds of experiments that they designed. They don't mention that they wrote a dissertation. They don't mention the name of their dissertation or anything like that. It's all very focused on data analysis and statistical and programming. Then there's this postdoctoral research experience, which I feel like they took a very, very different approach, but is also totally valid. It's your page, you can do whatever you want. So this postdoctoral research role, they kept the name postdoctoral researcher, and then they just very, very briefly at a very high level described what they studied. So they studied the molecular mechanisms that underlie the pathogenesis of bronchopulmonary dysplasia, lung disease in preterm infants. That's it. That's all that they wrote. So one thing that I like about this is that it seems pretty clear that they were doing research. It seems clear that they were doing like health-related research. It's described a little bit in a way that like anyone in the healthcare field, I think, could kind of understand what they were doing, at least at a very high level. They probably could have added a lot more content, like the different tools that they use, how do they analyze the data. There's all sorts of things that they could have added. They decided not to, and that's fine. But another thing that they did was they added in all the publications directly into this role. So you can see the kind of start of a couple of them there, which is an option that you can do. And so it is a way for if somebody is interested in learning more about what they did in this role, they can just read that manuscripts. Personally, I have my publications in a separate section, but there's more than one way to make a LinkedIn page. And then the one on the bottom, the associate professor role, this person also did a bullet technique. And this person is in more of like a data analyst role, but they did include a lot of these other experiences like mentoring students and designing and teaching courses and statistics. So this person probably could have pruned some of this down if they wanted to. So for example, I think maybe teaching these graduate and undergraduate courses in statistics could be relevant. I'm not so sure about the social and personality psychology, but maybe it's relevant because they're talking about it being for like business school and they do data analyses in a business setting. So there's like different ways like that I think you can see how like you can stretch your experiences to kind of fit in to what you're looking for. I would also have recommended that this person kind of reorder this a bit. So for example, they have this popular art package that they developed at the very end of their list. I would have moved that way up. And then I would have moved maybe the designing and teaching courses further down. I also would recommend maybe reworking the analytics degree track for psychology. I don't think that that's necessary for the current role. It's certainly something that they did in the role. So this is like the third bullet point from the bottom, but you can kind of get a sense of when there's like a lot of content that's under the experience, even though there's a lot of good stuff here that's relevant to data science and statistics, it's kind of easy to get lost. So that's really why I generally recommend pruning out things that are a little bit less relevant. But I think it's just generally good to look at a bunch of different examples of the experience page, summary page, basically every part of the LinkedIn page to try to figure out what you like and what you don't like. And ultimately, it's your decision. It's your page. I think we've already kind of mentioned this, but underneath the experiences, you can add skills. I don't know why my mouse isn't showing up. Oh, there it is. And now it's gone. You can add skills. So that research analyst physician on the top right, you can see the big list of skills at the bottom. So you can assign them to those individual roles. You can also assign top skills for each role, which I think is interesting, so that you can kind of highlight throughout your experiences. For example, what kind of coding languages you use in each of the roles, which I think is super useful, especially for people transitioning out of academia, to just draw that sort of linear connection between whatever skills you want to emphasize, to show like I used R in my position as a postdoc, in my position as a grad student. So I have like 10 years of experience with R. Whereas if I didn't have that, it wouldn't be quite as clear to people outside of academia that I did something like that. Another thing that none of these really do, I do have this in my skills or my experience section rather, but I didn't throw an example on here. I have a little summary at the top of most of my sections about what the company or role entails. And so the reason that I did that is because I'm currently working in ad tech and nobody knows what that is. So when you have a company or a role that's maybe a little bit ambiguous, if there's just like the name of the company, it isn't clear what it does, it's not a very well-known company, it could be good to just in 1 or 2 sentences clarify what it is that you do. So like my company's name does not specify at all that we're in ad tech. So now I can write a little blurb about what we do and what it means. But then because I like to be consistent, I definitely recommend being consistent across the experiences. I added a little summary for all of my roles. So now it's, I write a little bit about the kind of labs that I was in when I was a postdoc and when I was a grad student, just to kind of create that parallel structure, because otherwise it would look really weird and amiss to have just one experience described differently. All right. So that's the experiences section. Yeah, and in general, I would recommend keeping your experiences slightly different from your resume so that if they read your resume afterwards, it doesn't seem like super redundant. So next thing that is kind of short that we can talk about is endorsements and recommendations. So there's 2 different ways that you can kind of build up your reputation on LinkedIn. So endorsements are sort of when people are endorsing skills for you. And it just shows up kind of at the bottom of your page when they're kind of hovering over and looking at your skills, who has endorsed you for this. So you could endorse skills for others that you've worked with professionally, and maybe they'll return the favor for you. Sometimes people just randomly endorse skills. Like I've had like my sister-in-law endorse skills for me for some reason. I think that it's kind of a cue. I think that they want me to endorse skills. But there's all sorts of options that you can do here. And it seems like maybe a little thing, but it doesn't hurt to have other people kind of endorse that you have these different skills, just kind of, again, making it clear that you're a real person, you're not a bot, that other people agree with you, your description of the kind of work that you've done and things like that. You can add, as we mentioned, up to 50 skills on your page and ensure that the top skills are at the top of the section. And then for those top skills, you can maybe ask your connections to endorse those skills. Or you can, again, go into their page and endorse some of their skills and hope that they return the favor. There's also recommendations. This is kind of small, so maybe I'll read this one. But these are sort of short paragraphs on your page from a professional in your network. And they're just kind of teeny little letters of recommendation that show up on the bottom of your profile. And again, just like a way to build up your reputation. So I've had students that I've worked with do recommendations for me. I've done recommendations for them. It actually started off as an assignment. So like for their school, the internship that they worked on with me, one of their assignments was to get someone to write a recommendation on their LinkedIn page. And it's actually an excellent assignment because then they have this forever on their LinkedIn page, a little blurb about how I enjoyed working with them, what they did with me, and then they return the favor, which is really nice. So you can do these recommendations for people you've worked with, your students, your colleagues, whoever. And especially if you're planning to stay in academia, I think this is a really important way that you can support your former mentees, your former students, your mentees, and help them build out their network and their reputation outside of academia as well. So I'm just going to read these super short things. And there's some details in the presenter notes about how to write these recommendations, but basically you want to like explain the nature of your relationship, offer details about the position that they worked in, explain how they helped the company, your research, etc., and just generally talk about your experiences working with that person. So I'm going to read this one. Like, I cannot say enough kind things about this person. I've never had a manager who was so thoroughly invested in my personal and professional development. Her mindfulness of me and my goals and challenges is truly remarkable, and her dedication to her own improvement as a manager is unrivaled. Without reservation, I can fully recommend her as a people leader for any organization or team in need. Just like something nice, short, and sweet like that. And shows off your personality as well, and that like you're a good person to work with. So it definitely helps to have these sort of recommendations. All right, so I think that we do have a few minutes, a little bit of time to do this exercise that I was hoping that we could do. But basically, throughout this, I think I've tried to really highlight the importance of drawing inspiration from examples. There's a lot of great content out there, and you should feel free to use it to draw inspiration to craft your own LinkedIn page. So I just recommend finding profiles of people with similar backgrounds, people in roles that you like, or just search online for like good general examples of pages. That's where I found this one. And kind of just go through and take note of what you like and what you don't like, and then use those insights when crafting your profile. So I was hoping that we could just take a couple of minutes just to kind of look up a few LinkedIn profiles and discuss what you like or dislike with someone sitting next to you. And I can I'll pull up one or two from this link too, in case you don't have access. So I'm just going to wait a few minutes. And if anyone wants to share after those few minutes, share your insights, that'd be great. All right, we'll just take one more minute. All right. Does anybody want to share anything that they found looking through LinkedIn pages?
Hi, I'm Tara. I'm a graduate student, and I was looking at other graduate students' LinkedIn profiles, and I just stumbled across someone that I knew from undergrad and had connected with. And I know she's in medical school, and I knew that before looking at her profile, but that's the one thing that really shows up is that she's in med school, and she doesn't really have an about section, so it's hard to know what she's looking to do next or what she's really doing outside of school. So I guess that's important, whether you're looking for a position or not, to make it prominent of like what your presence on LinkedIn is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and having missing sections, it makes the profile a lot less engaging, right? Especially like an about section. You can provide so much information there, so it's like a missed opportunity. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else want to share? I'll get back. Oh, wait, no, go ahead.
Sorry. My name's Lena. I'm also a graduate student. I actually just had a question. I know this is like up for debate. But as like a PhD candidate, I know some PhD candidates put not that they're a candidate as their like under their name on their bio, but then they'll say like research analyst or do you agree or disagree or have an opinion on that? Because I get mixed feedback for what I should put for mine.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a mix. Some people swear by it. Other people think that it's like dishonest. Honestly, I think it's okay. Like, I don't think that it's dishonest necessarily. If you do want to just to write something that's not your actual job title, one thing that I know that some people do is just they clarify it during the interviews. So that's a way for them to get around any like issues surrounding background checks, which is really the concern that people have. Like if you write research analyst and then someone tries to do a background check on you and they call your university and they're like, we didn't have this person as a research analyst. That's where I think the issue could arise. I have never heard of that happening. I think that's just something that people worry about. But I think that it could definitely be a good idea, again, to kind of translate what your role was in industry terms. So it's like it's something that I've actually just recently tried to do. So I'm like starting to just apply for a handful of jobs here and there. So I'll definitely let everyone know if that bites me later. But I think it's totally okay if that's something that's you're comfortable with.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Any other questions?
I think that's it for right now.
Okay, great. So I'll get back to, I just have a couple more slides. I know that we want to finish up a bit before the hour. Okay, great. So this is just some finishing touches. So just a few things that you want to just kind of check off to make sure that it's all ready to go before you like kind of finally launch your profile, before you start to really build out your network. We kind of just mentioned this. Thank you. I think Tara, for your comment. You want to ensure that all fields are completed. So all the fields that we went over today, but there's also some other ones like education, certificates, which I've spelled wrong, publications, etc. Just make sure that everything that you can enter content into has content entered into it, because it's just going to make your profile more complete. Having your education also will show up with your university's logo on it. It'll make it easier for you to connect to alumni. Like there's reasons for filling in every single section. So you might as well just fill them all in. You want to do spelling and grammar checks so that you don't have embarrassing issues. It's something that like I personally struggle with, but you can also use ChatGPT for this if you struggle with spelling and grammar check your own content. You can copy and paste the content directly into ChatGPT and just ask it to check grammar for you. It takes 1 second, super easy. There's also this option to customize your URL. So this might seem like silly or unnecessary, but as I mentioned, like you will be asked to put in your LinkedIn URL to a lot of job applications. So rather than trying to remember like that random sequence of numbers at the end of your LinkedIn, like I do, it might be just helpful to get a customized URL, and then you could just write like Nicole Betts, PhD. Instead of that, it'd be a lot easier. And it also kind of looks cool. You can also reorder the sections. So they come in a standardized order. But as I mentioned before, like if you look at how people interact with LinkedIn pages, they usually look at like the profile pictures and headers, and then they go down to experience, and then they go back up to the about section. So you could just reorder that for them. It will make your profile a little bit more unique, and then maybe a little bit more user friendly if that's how people are really engaging with it. And you can also reorder sections to be like, I want to put my publications higher or something like that, just to like craft it in a way that makes sense. This is what we do also when we're creating like academic CVs, right? Like put the sections in like the most important order. You also want to make sure that you're following all sorts of channels that could be helpful for you, including influencers. Influencers do post a lot of good content, including like job opportunities. So this is just a list of some people that post like professional tips and jobs and stuff like that. And this is not necessarily like finishing touches for your first draft, but just something to keep in mind is just to kind of revisit and update your LinkedIn regularly. So this is like my last slide pretty much. But once you have a solid LinkedIn page, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to start building out your network. You want to get your profile out there. So one of the goals that you may have heard is you want to get at least 500 plus connections. So it sounds like a lot for a professional network, but you can get there even if you started from scratch. It's just when you open your page, it says how many connections that you have. And if you have at least 500, it just shows up at 500 plus. So it doesn't really benefit you from that perspective to have more. So that's why this is the goal. You want to just reach out to people you know professionally for sure, but you can also reach out to people you know personally to build out that network. This is something that I didn't realize so much, but the personal connections are also, that's also like professional networking. Like I know a lot of people who I've never worked with in a professional setting who have recommended jobs to me, who have recommended companies to me, who have put me in communication with people in their company who are hiring, things like that. And having them in your LinkedIn, it's not going to hurt. Maybe they'll post a job ad that's related to you, that's from their company. So you just might as well reach out to them. You can also reach out to people from your alumni network, from undergrad, from grad school, from postdoc. An easy way to sort of build out your community. You can look at alumni who are at certain companies to try to, again, establish those communications and maybe build a relationship for like a future job reference or something like that, or just to chat with them to learn more about what it's like to work at that company. And if you're starting a new profile, which I did like 3 years ago, what I did was I maxed out my connection requests each week. So I forget how many you can do. Maybe it's like 100 connection requests a week. But it was like a game for me to make sure that I maxed out every single week. And then I got up to like that 500 plus connections in like a month and a half. It was not that hard. So I definitely recommend that technique if you can, just kind of brainstorming everyone that you've ever met and then sending them connection requests and then tapping into these other things like alumni networks. I also definitely recommend following company pages. This is just a way for you to kind of signal that you're interested in a company. You can get prompted when they have new job ads available, etc. And then you can maybe start to build relationships with recruiters at those companies as well. If you're following the pages, the recruiters are likely to post in like conjunction with that page. And then you can maybe reach out to a recruiter to ask about opportunities at that company. Even if they don't have jobs, you can just ask them to chat about if they have any jobs now or in the future that you might be interested in, or qualified for. That was what I was looking for. It's a great way to get in. Another thing that I didn't realize existed was there's a bunch of professional networks on LinkedIn. I've put a bunch of them that I thought might interest this group on the side, but they have like biotech and pharma professionals networks. They have SciComm related, like any type of field, there are professional networks for it. And so you can follow these on LinkedIn. They'll have resources, they'll have professional tips, they'll have job boards, everything that you can imagine. And it's also a great way to, again, build your network, get your name out there. So I definitely recommend connecting and following these professional networks. And in general, just kind of remember with LinkedIn that the more connected you are, the more searchable you'll be, and the more useful content you will see. That's how the LinkedIn algorithm works, like with any social media. Like, so get those connections built out. And then this is not a true slide, I guess, but these are just additional resources on LinkedIn. One thing that I want to point out here is LinkedIn Learning. Some schools pay for this. So if not, there's like a free trial, but there's a lot of like learning resources there, tutorials, stuff like that. All right. Went a little bit further than I wanted to, but are there any other questions?
We have a couple questions.
Hi, I'm Riley. I'm a graduate student here, and I just had a quick question about how you would like get a target audience if you're starting out in the job market. Like you're not going to have like those super specific details. So what would you recommend doing for an instance like that?
For like the audience that you'd want to like craft your LinkedIn profile towards?
Yes. And if you're applying for some careers that may be a little different from each other, how you would encompass like multiple positions in one profile.
Yeah, I think that that's really tricky. In general, like in an ideal world, I would recommend doing one at a time. So I know this is really tricky, especially if you're just trying to figure out what you want to do. But if you could be like, maybe this month I'm going to try applying for like SciComm positions or something, then your target audience would be like hiring managers or recruiters in SciComm. And then you can craft all of your materials for like that SciComm audience and kind of just see how it goes for like a month or two, and then kind of switch gears and be like, now I want to look at, I don't know, data science, and then kind of retweak. If that's not possible, if you like really don't want to do that, then maybe just be clear, I guess, in your about me section, like these are the two paths that I'm considering. I am interested in like data science for these reasons. I'm interested in whatever I said the other one was for these reasons, SciComm. And then maybe separate the rest of your profile out in those bins if you can. Like, so if you have SciComm as your first heading and then data science, and have all of like the SciComm stuff at the top and then data science at the bottom of like your experiences and stuff, that might work. But I think honestly, you'd be better off if you could do one or the other.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anisha. I'm a PhD student as well. I was just curious, should you list all of your previous work experience or should it be more refined, like on your resume?
I think it should be more refined, for sure. So if there are certain experiences that you have that are completely irrelevant, you don't need to include them. Or at the very least, you can include the experience and then try to craft the background or the bullets so that they're more directed for the role that you are targeting.
We had one more question in the chat asking if the paid version is necessary.
I have never used the paid version. The LinkedIn stats say that it's really helpful. You can do, I think, a 1 month trial or something for free. So that might be a good way for you to get a sense of if it's helpful or not. But I've never tried it, so I can't speak to it. Sorry.
And I will just plug, if you were not with us last year, Dr. Betts gave an excellent presentation on curating your CV specifically for industry. And we have that recording still up on YouTube. So you can access that. If you have questions about your resume, that would be a great place to look.
Yeah.
Otherwise, thank you so much. If y'all please join me in thanking Dr. Betts.
Thank you all. Feel free to reach out if you have any other questions.
That was awesome. It's so great to see you again, Nicole. Thank you so
You too.
much.
Take care.
All right. Give me 1 second while we switch over.